And it is wonderful to gather here to see this fabulous exhibition and all the different things going on. I'd like to introduce Glenn, who's been with us this week as our main speaker. Glenn is the CEO of Speak Life, a charity based down on the south coast near Eastbourne. He's married to Emma, has 2 children. Glenn, we're thinking a little bit about creativity this morning and art and that kind of thing. You're a creative. You make a number of films and write books. What do you enjoy most about the creative process?
I've always loved what Stephen King said about writing. He wrote one of the great books on writing, called On Writing, I think. And he said that creativity is more like archaeology than it is like architecture. And the ideas that you have are not you're building something novel from scratch, but it's rather you kind of come across a fossil and you're like, oh, what is that? And actually the creative process is kind of getting rid of the detritus around it and discovering, oh, it goes off in that direction. I had no idea it goes off in that direction. And Stephen King would sort of talk about asking the characters in his novel, where do you want to go? And he's got that sense of when you pull at the thread of beauty, you find yourself going in some really interesting directions that you didn't come up with. You're not an architect. You're an archaeologist. And I just find it fascinating that when you think through a story, let's say, or you've got a visual concept, you sort of wake up and you know have an idea in the shower, and as you follow that sort of thing, you're following something that's ancient, that's deep, that's already there, that seems to have a transcendent value to it already. So I think being involved in creativity sort of tilts you towards the transcendent, tilts you towards the idea of God, and to be involved in that is just, it's a lot of fun.
That's wonderful. Now, one of the creative things you've been doing is creating a course called 321. There's information on the tables in front of you as well. Tell us a bit about the course, who it's for, what it's about.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a digital Mere Christianity that you can do in person as well. So Mere Christianity, the book by C.S. Lewis, is read by Christians and non-Christians alike. I think Christians, probably, it's by law, you have to have it on your shelf somewhere, an old dusty copy of it. And when you dust it off, you read through it and you really enjoy it. And you really enjoy getting back to basics and sort of being evangelized again by C.S. Lewis. And but also, it's the sort of thing that you pass on to a friend. If they want to know the basics of the Christian faith. And 321 is trying to be that. It's something that Christians can do and just be really refreshed by seeing Jesus' vision for God, the world, and you. But it's also something that you can do with people who are Christian curious, wanting to lean in and discover more about the faith. And so you guys are running this on Monday nights, and for 4 Monday nights you'll come in, and every single session is based around a story, because we believe in creativity. We believe that we are visual creatures. We believe that we are story-driven creatures, that we have an aesthetic sense, that beauty is very important, and so you come and you think your way into a story as the way of seeing Jesus' vision for life. So I'd recommend it. If you're a Christian, if you're not a Christian, come and do a kind of a Mere Christianity that makes sense.
Wonderful. Well, we have more details about how to sign up that towards the end. This morning you're talking on Jesus and justice. But before that, interviewing Paul. So let me hand over to you for the rest of the morning.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I just want to introduce Paul Hobbs, our artist in residence here at St. Ebbe's. Paul, do you want to describe yourself in a couple of sentences? Who is Paul Hobbs?
I'm a conceptual artist. I make painting and sculpture that explore social issues in Christian faith.
Okay.
And my purpose in doing that is actually to help people sort of realize that Jesus Christ is relevant to every part of life. And particularly people come up with questions and things about the difficult parts of life. So I want to address that straight up with the work, so that you come in and you see, okay, here's something that is really complicated and difficult. Can we find God in it?
Okay, so you'll have to explain to a Philistine Australian conceptual art. Can you give us a kind of a taxonomy of terms? Where does conceptual art fit? Is visual art a kind of an overarching umbrella and conceptual is underneath? Or like how are we thinking about different kinds of art?
There are many ways to make art. So when I started art college, I had a very traditional view of art. And in fact, and then over the time you realize there's so many different ways to make things. You have to choose what is your path in that. And I became very excited about, I wanted to sort of tell stories. might be difficult concepts, or things they don't want to hear. How do you tell a story that somebody doesn't want to hear? And a lot of people today don't want to hear about Jesus. So how do you draw them in?
Yeah.
So that's part of the starting point. I mean, compared to our art, when my wife, of 25 years now, first saw my art, she thought it was rubbish.
Rubbish, okay.
And that includes quite a bit of stuff that's still on the walls here. Yeah. And that was because she had a very fixed traditional view of art, and it didn't fit that. But when she began to understand and look deeply, it's a lot about getting people to look.
Yes.
And then, so there are these just children's bricks.
Yeah, should we have look over here? Yeah, yeah.
Oh, it's lovely, there's something for the kids. We're all adults, let's look at the art. But that is part of what this is about. Because if you do look, and if you do play, you can rearrange these and then things. And over the last few days, people have built all sorts of stuff. But you find there are words in it, words like spirit. Blessed appears here.
Blessed appears a lot.
You've got hunger, kingdom, and so on. Do you think, what are you going to do with these words? Do they mean anything? Can you rearrange and make some sentences? So here they are, these words. As you look, you'll find the word blessed appears lots of times. So for those of us with a Christian background, it triggers something. You think, oh, okay, blessed are the, what? Oh, the merciful. I found the merciful. For they will be shown mercy. Or blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons and daughters of God. And then you begin to think, oh, do the colours mean anything? Some of the colours not. But all the words are colour-coded. So you could pick all the words with green, and that would be blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. You can make that sentence. But even if you don't know that, even if you're just confused by it, what does the word righteousness mean? For most people, they won't hear that word or speak that word for a whole month or a year. Or, it's not focusing there, but you put it in front of people, you have to deal with it.
Yes.
You might bury it, and so on. Or the word persecuted appears 3 times here. What's that about?
Persecuted for righteousness' sake is one of the verses.
It is.
Right.
Persecuted for righteousness. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven as well. So you've got that sense about. So you're confronting people with some words which we know are Jesus' words. What are you going to do with them? Are they just for kids? We're adults now. We don't need religion. I used to go do that at school, but not anymore. Or if you really mine into them and think deeply about them, they can become building blocks for life.
Right.
Found ways to live.
Right. So is Jesus teaching child's play, or is it foundational? Is one question that people are really being asked to play with. And I don't know, is there a sense of, are Jesus' words infinitely malleable? Because there are some combinations that wouldn't work. But these kind of combinations do. And I wonder whether sort of modern society is a little bit of a jumble of a pick and mix Jesus kind of spirituality that happens.
It could be that. So there's the danger of that. But also, you're inviting people to come into a conversation. So you'll find the word God appears twice. It's on shape like this. Is that it? No. But there's another one like this which says God on it. And then there's a big one, as big as this one here, which has God on it. And you can think, is God big or important in your life? You know, God, if that was the God at the top of everything. Or will you bury it? Because you don't want to bury it.
Ha.
I don't want God in my life. You might ask me things that or I just hate him for some reason. And you bury it. But if you address that question, you have had to think about it. And most people don't think about God all day long. Once in a school, I came back at lunchtime and some kids had played with this, which is the whole point, but they'd written, God is evil because of, and used something else. And I was kind of a bit upset, someone's, kind of subverting what I'm doing. And then I thought, no, the child who did that thought about the positive before they turned it into a negative.
So they thought of what good is in order to judge God as not good.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
But if they hadn't seen this, they wouldn't have thought about it at all. So sometimes when we're in conversations and you realize there's a negative coming there back from somebody, actually it's because they're reflecting in the mirror, if you like, something they thought about God.
I think that's very interesting because I think a lot of modern people might not have a vocabulary for God, but they definitely do have a vocabulary for, I picked up this word righteousness, but it's a translation of a Greek word that you could equally translate justice, right? That we have a category for justice at least, even if a lot of people don't have a category for God. And what I love about your art is you can never stay at a distance from it. Literally every single piece of work that you do is pulling you in. And I wonder if we can go over here and start thinking about that concept of justice, because I think if we keep pulling on the idea of justice, we will find a very God-shaped reality behind it. So this one's called Nil by Mouth. Tell us what we see in Nil by Mouth.
Yeah, come up closer later and read, because you've got a figure of a man standing by a hospital bed. And it was based on a photograph I took of this gentleman in hospital. He was sitting down. I knew he was waiting for 3 operations on his legs, and he stood for the photograph. And afterwards, I thought, there's so much dignity in the way he stands. This is me. I'm not a crumpled old man. This is me. And I thought I'd use that for this. So I've portrayed the image. I made the hospital look much more gloomy. He's really isolated. He's alone. There are jagged shapes just fractured from the photocopy that I used as the basis of the image. So it's torn and fragmented. I've emphasized, he's in bed number 10. Is he just the guy in bed number 10? Is he just a set of medical notes? I've seen people in hospital, they look at the notes and go, oh yeah, have you had your they look up quickly. And they're really just concerned about the medical issues and not the person. And then there's very emphatically, you see Nil by Mouth written on his bed, like stamped on there, so that the nurses won't feed him before an operation. They could have asked him, but there it is, it's labeled. And if you ask a child, what does Nil by Mouth mean? They don't really know, so they will hesitate, put some guesses like he can't talk, or we might even think as adults sometimes older people are not worth talking to, and that we marginalize them and forget about them. And then you've got some text here. This is actually, if you look carefully, you get glimpses of something about euthanasia. So you can take it that far. Well, here it says, ensure your healthy future, which I'll come back to as a medical advert. The one thing, or 2 things really, that are positive here is the way it's been set into this frame. So traditional icons, you get a piece of wood and you carve into it before you put the picture in. So these are solid panels and I've carved into that. And then you put the image in. And if you do that as an artist, if you've made the frame that carefully before you put the image in, you better put a good image in. Whereas a lot of times you make a series of things, and if they're any good, you frame them and you put the others away. So, it's a real intent. So it's giving dignity. And in Russian, this is called a kovchek. It's a recess. It means the ark, like the Ark of the Covenant, or the Noah's Ark. It's a treasure chest, because what is contained in there is precious. So you've got that. But you've also got this light, like a halo, like a fuzzy light, saying he's significant and he's precious to the Lord God, who loves him.
And there's something deeply theological about being able to look at a person who might not be economically productive to, society.
Yeah.
And maybe, there's no family around him. Perhaps he does have a family, but we don't see any family around him. He's not in any bonds of love, and yet there is the glow of he has intrinsic worth, he has intrinsic dignity, he's made in the image of God. There's something profoundly theological about just looking in the face of somebody who is weak and unproductive and who can offer you nothing, and yet you say, this person is supremely valuable. It's a profoundly Christian thing, actually, isn't it? To look at a person who is weak, vulnerable, marginalized on the outside, and yet they are supremely valuable. That's also a theme of this piece of work. Can you take me through this one?
Yeah, I'm sorry you guys can't see it, so you'll have to trust me, but the description will tell you. First of all, you've got an old wooden panel. It's taken from a skip. It's part of a tabletop. It had skanky paint on it and other material. I cleaned it back, and halfway through I thought, I won't clean it completely. I want you to know it's a rubbishy board. But onto that, I've built up some layers. Firstly, there's red paint underneath, which is a symbol for suffering. And then there's gold paint, which is bronzy, so it's not very shiny. And then on top of that, you've got gold leaf. But the image, the figure that is there, is taken from a news photograph, as it happened, of Sudan. It was made 30 years ago, but today Sudan is a real mess. With the war and so on, a lot of refugees and starving people, comparable to 30 years ago. So here's a woman, and you see a collaged image, or when I say collaged, I haven't invented the image. I've taken the image, photocopied it 3 or 4 times. I've stuck it down and torn it, I've not rearranged the shape of the figure at all, but it's broken, like tearing a photograph and then putting it back together. So you get a sense of their lives being really worn. People, superficially, you're seeing 2 figures. It looks like it's a mother and child. Someone says, oh, is it Mary? Well, look more deeply. You'll see the person is very, very thin. You'll see that the taller figure is female, and there's a baby on her hip. And the baby's head is large because he's starved too, and the head won't shrink, but the body will. And then you've got the surprising thing, you've got a halo. Maybe that's not surprising, but you think, well, are these people holy or special? But the halo has a cross in it. And if you see a picture in, say, the National Gallery of Jesus and the disciples all wandering up a hill and he's giving some teaching, they've all got halos, all 12. But Jesus has a cross in his halo. Oh, is it? We need this as well. Okay, is that better? Did anybody miss anything I've said already?
Start again. We're back with the blocks.
Okay, so the halo has a cross. So both the figures... It's gone off again. No, sorry. Okay. Both figures have halos in with crosses, which is saying this person is Jesus. But there are 2 of them. They're both Sudanese, and one of them is a woman.
Sure, your hand is up there, apparently, so it's not blocking that, which is talking to that. Anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Hand up there, if that's all right. Yeah.
Yeah?
So your hand.
higher.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Remember that if you do this. Okay, so the halos are saying these people are both Jesus, which of course is a puzzle, or if you could say it's wrong. But to the top right of the image is something written in Greek, so you can't read it, but you know it's important. But translated, it says, "As you do to the least of these, so you do for me." Right. Okay, and that answers the puzzle. As these people may or may not be holy, they may or may not be Christians, but they're certainly not Christ. But in the way that we respond to them in their moment of need can be as we are responding to Christ.
So those words are from Matthew 25,
yep.
and Jesus is saying what you do for the least of these, and he talks about those who are in prison, there are those who are hungry, there are those who need clothing, and whatever you do for them, you do for me, which actually birthed a profound sense of Christ hidden in the least and the last and the lost. Christ hidden in the most overlooked and insignificant kind of people. So that, how do you encounter Christ? You can encounter Christ in worship, in church. You can also encounter Christ in the way you deal with, those who are starving, let's say, or those who are economic migrants or fleeing warfare.
Or those who are sick.
Or those who are
or
sick.
Old, yeah.
And that actually the way I treat him is kind of the way I'm treating Christ, because Christ puts himself into the least and the last and the lost. And that gives a profound sense of dignity for people that is not based on their economic output or their strengths or anything like that.
Yeah. And that God's heart is particularly for those,
Yes.
Particularly for them. He's weeping for them. He's crying for them.
Yes.
And, that person there, it's 30 years ago, maybe she survived. Maybe she died of famine. Maybe she's a Christian. Maybe we'll meet her in heaven. It's not just an image representing thousands, it's a particular person. If you ever get a newspaper image and some upsetting story, draw a halo around that person and just pray for one. It's hard to pray for 30,000 people, but pick one and maybe give them a name and pray for them. You can do it for other people too. Pray for terrorists. Pick a name. There's even a website called Pray for a Terrorist, and you can pick some guy or woman, and people praying for them.
Yeah.
They need to be in the kingdom of heaven. Wouldn't that be amazing as well?
Yeah. Fascinating. And as we think about justice, certain schools of thought in the ancient world would have thought, well, justice is about enforcing the inequalities of nature. Nature gives you unequal, there are strong people and there are weak people, there are rich people and there are poor people. What does justice mean? We tend to think that justice means remedying inequality, don't we? We have this profound sense that those who are weak and poor and, on the outside of things should be brought in, and that is justice. I think that would be news to a lot of ancient thinkers. A lot of ancient thinkers would think, well, no, justice is enforcing the inequalities that nature has given to you, Christianity comes along and says, actually, we have this profound sense of justice, of actually remedying inequality and lifting up the lowly, and the last shall be first. It's a profound, and I think we've got that sense to this day, that whenever somebody says justice means remedying inequality, they are speaking a profoundly Christian language. I wanted to take us to this piece, which again is one of these wonderful pieces that absolutely draws you in, and the closer you get, the more you see. So Paul, talk us through the dartboard.
Okay. From the distance, I'm thinking for you guys particularly, you're seeing a dartboard in the center. You've got a box. You might see this sort of box in a pub, but unusually this box is covered with news stories and articles. Were you to be close enough to read them, you'd see they're all about harmful things happening. The more graphic images tend to be about violence, perhaps in war or people harmed. The headlines, you've got something to do with drug barons, bombing, something to do with Stalin and Hitler there as well. We've got some stuff about Rwanda, looting in Somalia, and on it goes. You've got cheating, embezzlement, frauds, much more abstract kinds of things which harm other people, but economically that can be desperately harmful for other people. So you've got all of that. Then you've got the dartboard in the center. Up here you can see some numbers, 70 times 7 written on the scoreboard. Here's the scoreboard, the name of the game if you like. We'll come back to that. So you notice that if you don't know what those numbers mean, you know they're important. And you're talking to people who don't want to hear things, you know, they know they're important, and they'll get there in the end. But as you get up close, maybe when you're 10 feet away or less, you see there's a drawing of Jesus. And we know it's Jesus because we have a crown of thorns, but also some letters, INRI, Rex Iudem, King of the Jews. Jesus of Nazareth, Rex Iudem, King of the Jews. It's not just any crucifixion, it's Jesus. And he's drawn there, and you sort of lose him in the picture a little bit because of it's a thin line drawing. And you can throw the darts, or we used to let people throw, but it's got a bit worn now. But the sense is that you could be throwing darts at this drawing of Jesus. So the picture is asking, why would you do that? What does it mean that you're doing that? And people will suggest different answers to that. And one of them will be, well, because of all these things in the world, why doesn't God stop it? Why doesn't God take charge? Or take it more aggressively, I'm angry at God for those things that have happened. You know, I have a friend way back, I remember his father died in a car accident. I hate God. You know, we'll hear that a lot, and we can feel that sometimes ourselves. And it's a legitimate question to ask. When you take God as a broad thing, it's easy to sort of hold that idea. But if you focus on this, it's not just any God, it's Jesus. And then you can ask the questions again. Is Jesus at fault for this particular story? This is a Soviet prisoner. She's had her back cut and open for an operation, for an experiment. There's nothing wrong with her, but she's worth nothing. So we'll use her for an experiment. Cut her back from her neck to her bottom. Or this is a girl with blood on her. The woman next to her, her granny, was blown up with a mortar bomb and so on. You know, who did that? The soldiers that fired the mortar. And so on. You can go around all these stories. People made choices. It wasn't Jesus who did those things. And then you can flip back, who is Jesus? If it's true what you read in the Gospels, then he heals the sick, he raises the dead, he champions the rights of women, he challenges hypocrisy amongst the religious leaders, and so on and so on. And then when they try to find anything he did wrong, they couldn't find anything. They couldn't even get two people to agree on anything he'd done wrong. So what is he doing on the cross? He doesn't deserve to be there. Or what a mistake. Was it a mistake? Jesus prophesies, speaks about it many times in the just 2 years before he dies. So it's not an accident. He says he's going there. So why is he there? And then you come back to these numbers. St. Peter asked Jesus, how many times should I forgive somebody? Should it be 7? Jesus says, no, 70 times 7. So Jesus is saying for us, we need to keep on and on forgiving people. That's what we're asked to do. But what Jesus is doing on the cross is he's going there to take the blame for all this stuff we've done individually or collectively that separates us, that harms other people, but also breaks our friendship with God. And he's not to blame for any of it, but he dies to take the blame.
He takes the sharp end of justice
Yeah.
into himself. There's so much more that could be said about that. Do come and check this artwork out. I want to finish up here on the stage with Well, what is this? We've got shoes arranged around some kind of flaming thing. What have we got?
Some people think this looks like seaweed upside down. You know, when you swim underwater and there's floating seaweed. But my intention is that it's meant to be like a fiery tree. Okay, it's stainless steel, it's partly painted red, burnt black a little bit as well, and the lights will flicker and change. And it becomes a center point for these shoes which have been given and worn by Christians in many parts of the world. And on the pages here, they've written what it means for them to believe in Christ in the places where they live. So why did I put this fiery object in the middle? It's like what anchors all of these people, what connects them, would be just as Moses saw this burning bush and goes up and has an amazing encounter with God. Each of the people here would say at some point in their life, they felt they met with God, they encountered God, and they had to change. They had to choose to go with him. Some of these people have had very difficult lives before they became Christians, and some after they became Christians. Others are quite wealthy, and they've used their opportunities to serve others quite sacrificially. But together, you know, we've got Japan, Serbia, Ethiopia, South Africa, India, USA, and so on. All kinds of different people.
And they're all gathered around, and so this is a flaming tree, and you're sort of evoking the burning bush from Exodus 3?
Yeah.
So an incredible portrait, really, of the Lord descending into injustice, because the Israelites are in slavery in Egypt, and yet he comes and meets them in the middle of their trials.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Paul, are you around? Say one more thing. And then,
one more thing. I was just going to say, when I talk about this at different times, I talk about this thing about the burning bush, where God is within the burning bush, but he's actually setting himself alight. And it's kind of like to get Moses' attention. And I just think for each of these people that come to God in different ways, what does God have to do to get our attention? You know, here he sets himself alight. God will do extraordinary things to get our attention and that we may respond.
Fantastic. And I think your artwork actually draws people to that vision beautifully. So should we give a massive round of applause for Paul Hobbs? Thank you so much. Paul is around all day, so he would love to take you through so many more artworks. Literally every single piece wants to draw you in, and it really repays your attention. I just wanted to finish by drawing our attention back to that burning bush, because I think it has so much to say about the issue of justice and of God. In Exodus, we read about the people of God in slavery. It's often called a furnace of affliction. So Moses himself calls it a furnace of affliction. The prophets later on in the Old Testament call that time a furnace of affliction, when the great Pharaoh, the great power, is enslaving them all. And what is God going to do about that? Is God on the side of Pharaoh, or is he on the side of the enslaved people? And that question really reverberated down through the ages, and it kind of led to the abolition of the slave trade 200 years ago. There really were many people trying to think through, on what side is God? The side of the slaver or the side of the enslaved? And Exodus was one of those key texts where people were saying, God is not on the side of Pharaoh, actually. He's actually on the side of the poor and the marginalized and the enslaved. And so in this famous part of Exodus chapter 3, we've got the words up on the screen. There is Moses, and he is 80 years old. He is not an impressive figure. He had been an impressive figure when he was at Pharaoh's court, but he tried to get an uprising of the slaves happening 40 years earlier. That went south. He had to go into exile. He became a stranger in a strange land. But that is where God starts to work. Isn't that interesting? He doesn't work with powerful Moses to bring about change from on top. He works with weak Moses to bring about a grassroots change. Now, Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law. He's a shepherd, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Horeb just means dry place. And here is a root out of dry ground. There, the angel of the Lord, a mysterious figure, we'll think about him at the end, he appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. Isn't that interesting that throughout the Bible, actually God's people are described like a tree or a bush or a vine. And Jesus comes along in the New Testament and he says, well, I am that vine and you are the branches. So God's people, and particularly God's Son, is associated with this kind of foliage, this kind of plant, this kind of bush. And what is the bush doing? Well, the bush is on fire, but it's not consumed. It is like this kind of burning, smelting furnace of affliction, isn't it? And so God's people are on fire. They're on fire, but they're not consumed. And who should show up in the midst of that burning affliction but the angel of the Lord? That is what gets Moses' attention. And it is interesting that as you read through the book of Exodus, of all the spectacular signs in the book of Exodus, this is actually one of the less impressive, isn't it? God parts the Red Sea, and all the Israelites go through, and there's manna rains down from heaven, and there's the plagues, and there's all that kind of stuff that happens. If you were making Exodus the movie, your special effects budget would be blown on all that stuff. And you wouldn't have to spend very much on the burning bush, would you? In one sense, it's not spectacular. In another sense, when you actually draw near and pull at the thread, it's the most astonishing thing. It's God on fire. It's God setting himself on fire. It's the Lord descending into the midst of our furnace of affliction to be with us and to be for us. It's a strange sight, but it's actually the most compelling vision of God. Not simply the God who is above it all, but the God who would descend to a burning bush or who would descend to a cross to have the sharp arrows of justice pierce his own heart. It's a very compelling picture. Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. So when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush. Who is in the bush? The angel of the Lord. Now it's God. And he says, Moses, Moses. And Moses says, here I am. Do not come any closer. God said, take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God, who is in the bush. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. Pause there. This is where we get our modern sense of justice from. Ancient justice is, well, you've been dealt this particular hand by the fates, by the gods, and that is your lot. Profoundly Christian sense of justice is, you've been dealt a poor hand. How can we help? Right? That whatever nature has given to you, that is not the end of the story. And that whatever supernatural powers there are, they're not just confirming what nature has dealt you, but that actually the supernatural might come and help and lift you up and liberate you and give you what nature had not given you: grace, freedom, liberation, joy, bliss. The supernatural is the sort of thing, according to the Bible, that actually descends down and takes on himself the burning, and takes on himself the justice, and takes on himself the indignities and the weakness and even our sin, so that we might be lifted up. I have heard your cries, I have seen your affliction, and I'm concerned about their suffering. So, next verse, I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of those guys, right? Okay? This is the way of the God of the Bible. The way of the God of the Bible is always down and up. It's always to enter into the furnace of affliction, to be with us and to be for us and to lead us out. And perhaps if you've got some Bible knowledge, you might be thinking of another famous passage in the Old Testament. Do you remember when Daniel's three friends are in the furnace, literally? They're in the furnace. They've been thrown there, persecution for righteousness' sake, and there they are. And actually the king looks down into the furnace and he said, I threw three men in there. There's a fourth figure in there. And in the old King James translation, and the fourth looks like the Son of God. Isn't that interesting? What does God do when he sees his people in a furnace of affliction? He joins them in order to bring them out. And as you read on in Exodus, you get this sense of the Lord joining his people, and he leads them out, and they don't yet get to the promised land. Instead, they're in this wilderness time, and that's a bit like us today, right? If you're a Christian, you've been delivered from bondage to sin, and you're heading for a great future, a new heavens and a new earth, the home of righteousness. And in the meantime, what's it like? Well, we're in a wilderness time. And the land of milk and honey beckons, but right now we're just given little tastes, manna, this bread of heaven. And they tasted the bread of heaven. You know what it tasted of? Honey. A little taste of the future, wasn't it? Sometimes I think art can be a little bit like that, don't you? A little taste of glory, a little taste of the sweetness that is coming, something that sustains you in the wilderness time. But that is the pattern. God comes down into the suffering in order to lift us up and take us eventually to freedom, to the promised land. Next slide. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I've seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Our whole sense of progress is grounded in this story, really. Okay, biblically, this is really the sharp end of where the Bible teaches progress, actually. Sure, you can get it from page 1 of the Bible, that God starts with small things and he ends with great things, and he goes from darkness and goes to light, and history is set in a direction, onwards and upwards. But this story really kind of gives the paradigm. You were in slavery, but you're heading for freedom. You're heading for somewhere better. Again, that idea of progress, it's absolutely permeated our culture. You know where it's come from. It totally has come from the Bible. There we were, down and to the left, and then he lifts us up and to the right. Right? That is that sense of progress that we all have. And so Moses, though, doesn't think he's up to the job. Verse 11, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Next slide. Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. The one who is being and beauty and bliss. That's who God is. Classically, theologians have talked about God as the great I am, the one who is being himself, the one who is goodness, the one who is truth, the one who is beauty. But he doesn't remain at a distance as merely a transcendent ideal. In the Bible, being, beauty, bliss, the one who is goodness and truth and beauty, he comes down into the mess of this world. He descends, Christ on the cross. And there he is, not just without shoes, without clothes, stripped. And not just on a bush that's burning, but on a tree of cursing. And he takes our ugliness, and he takes our unrighteousness, he takes our injustice, he takes our sin, he takes our curse on himself, takes it down to the hell that it deserves, and rises up again. And he says, you can draw near to me. And I don't know if Jesus is a compelling vision for you in a world of injustice. We try to make sense of a world of injustice. I would first point you to the fact that there is such a thing as justice. When you look in the face of that elderly man, you are seeing something transcendent. You are seeing a value that goes beyond this world. When you look at those Sudanese starving refugees, you're looking at a value that is out of this world. There is such a thing as justice. And then you might think, well, okay, there is such a thing as justice, but what about all the injustice? And the Bible says, well, yes. What about all the injustice? And what about you? What about the ways that you add to the injustice of this world? And then the Bible says, look again, maybe first at the burning bush and then at this figure, the great I am, who did not just descend to a burning bush, but descended to that cross, to take your injustice on himself, to rise up again and to offer you being and beauty and bliss forever. That's the Christian story. And I think it's the story that makes sense of all your yearnings. Well, thank you so much for listening. There's so much more to be pressed into, and Paul can answer all your questions about that. But I'm going to hand back now to Tim. Thank you.